We are once again day texting. Thank you all for joining me, those of you who are able to do so. As you know, we meet weekday mornings and most Saturday mornings between 6:30 and 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time so that we can progressively work our way through these different biblical books and letters. At times, we also consider other related texts and documents, like last time when we took a look at the Assumption of Moses, or the writing known as the Assumption of Moses, as it's quoted in Jude. And we're going to do something similar today, where it concerns another text that Jude references that's not considered a part of the typical biblical books. But keep in mind, the Bible doesn't say how many inspired or how many books we're supposed to be relying on. As we're seeing here in the letter of Jude, there are many other texts that Jews and Christians used that contained reliable information. And whether or not they were inspired in part or completely, it's not really that significant because we have so much information. How much do you really need, right? But people today, I had a conversation with someone recently on my Facebook page, just a really, really dumb comment, and misleads a lot of people because the person, in addition to making really idiotic comments about God and metaphysics, typical Trinitarian stuff that they can't prove, then made an equally dumb comment about how the Bible only teaches there are 66 inspired books. So I said, oh really, where does it teach that? Where does it teach that? This is someone who got into this great big long discussion of all these texts involving Jesus and God and wanted to show how knowledgeable they were. And yet they didn't even know that the Bible doesn't teach the number of books that we're supposed to be using. So I simply pointed out what we should all already know. And that is we use the best available evidence. Right? The Bible doesn't tell us how many books to use or how many are inspired. That's just what dummies think, or people who have been misled and then lie to other people because they only want you to believe the books they believe. That's why I call them dummies or just liars, because I'm not talking about people who are ignorant or don't know. I'm talking about people who spend their whole life, it seems, arguing about metaphysics only to then reveal they believe that the Bible teaches there are only 66 books we should use in the sense of being from God. So we have a lot of retards in the world, people who just say things and really don't know what they're saying. So we're going to take a look at Jude because I know he knows what he's saying because of the way he writes and the applications he makes, including from non-biblical texts or texts that at one time were considered part of the collection of literature that we would refer to today as the Bible, but that just were really the collection of texts that these people used that were part of the tradition orally or in writing that was carried through from early times, even through the flood, down from eastern Anatolia into Sumer and ultimately Egypt, where Moses was raised, and ultimately from which place he brought the Israelites, along with all of that information and knowledge. So, that's what we should look to. And as you're going to see, that's what Jude looks to. He references texts that are reliable. Doesn't matter if they were considered on the same level as things like the Law of Moses. If they're accurate, if we can verify that the information is most likely correct, then it's usable. We don't go based on traditions that have no basis in the text. That's what the scribes and Pharisees did, and they were condemned. So we want to avoid that class of persons like I just described, but they're there. Seems like when I turn around and there they are again. It's one thing or another. Anyway, so good morning again to everybody if I didn't say so already. And someone is asking, is it possible to order JWD3? Yes. We'll get to the text in just a moment. So if you go to the Alive Who Book site, I'm going to go to that myself in a minute because I'm going to share with everybody some information from my critical translation of Jude. So you can get JWD3 in hardback edition. There's limited copies left of the hardcover. So if you want a hardcover copy, it's still there. Or you could get it in digital format, PDF. So they're both available. And I'll show you where in just a moment. So let's get to the text. So I was talking about how I had a conversation with someone who was really trying to just promote the Trinity in really the dumbest ways I've seen. Just totally nonsense. Waste all that time for nothing. Just to contradict Jesus' use of God and gods or gods in John 10. But I was talking to them and the issue of other texts came up. So this fits in perfectly with our text from Jude today and our day text reading last time, where we reviewed and considered the Assumption of Moses, the lost ending part that Jude references in part, about how Michael the Archangel was disputing with the devil over Moses' body. Very similar to how he was disputing with the angel of Jehovah, who was probably Michael, in Zechariah 3:2. Okay, so let's get back to the text. He's talking about, just to review briefly what we've discussed to this point. And he's talking about something that he didn't initially want to discuss, right? Shared salvation. But that he's going to bring up because it's more urgent. That is, people who are infiltrating the congregations and causing problems, misleading people, not teaching them the basic truths they need to know and how to work together to glorify God by imitating Jesus. So what does he say next about these people? He talked about how they have as an example before them Sodom and Gomorrah, and how they are disrespectful to glorious ones. And he used the example, as I mentioned, Michael the Archangel, and how even he wasn't disrespectful at that time to the devil, because he hadn't been given the kind of authority that we believe as Jesus he was later given in order to do things like throw him out of heaven. Either way, it's a good example of Michael the Archangel deferring to Jehovah rather than rebuke the devil based on what he probably was obviously doing wrong, because Michael knows, probably more than anyone, if he's Jesus especially, that there's no one better. There is no one better to address anyone than Jah. So when you do that, when you're faced with a difficulty, people being mean to you, persecuting you, whatever, and you have the strength of mind to not respond completely. Sometimes we have to respond or different things, defend ourselves, but to the extent that you can defer to Jah, like Michael, no one can respond better. I mean, when the devil heard that from Michael, he was probably hoping he could bait Michael into like this debate, like the Trinitarians try to do today. But when Michael said, "No, may Jehovah rebuke you," what do you think that the effect was on Satan, right? Because that was the perfect answer. He now could no longer really bother Michael. And Michael made him aware of the real problem coming Satan's way, and that is the Father. The Father will rebuke the devil. And he knows that. So let's let him do that. And at times he may use us, but let's let Jude do that as well. So here's Jude. He's writing about these people, and he's going to deal with them on some level, right? Because this is now the Christian congregation. They have authority to bind and loose. Jesus has come, been resurrected. So we're not in the condition where we never have to or are unable to rebuke the devil or demons. We have that authority. But, we don't have to be disrespectful or do so in ways that go beyond the authority we have as Christians. And we don't always have to rely on that authority. It's probably best to rely on Jah, if at all possible, even though we have authority at this time to do various things. Let's look at the text, and then we're going to read a couple other things related to it. All right, we're going to read verses 11 through 15. And here's what it says. He's talking about those people, the ones who he's writing about because there's a problem. They're infiltrating, and they're causing damage in the Christian groups. It's hard to believe, verse 11, what is going on with them, because they travel the way of Cain. Remember Cain, of course, he, instead of following the example of his brother who pleased Jah, he got so jealous of him that he killed him instead of just doing the thing that he saw would please Jah. They gave themselves over to the deception of financial gain showed by Balak and by the type of rebellion shown by Korah. They're lost. I'm not going to get into the background of all these different figures because there's a lot of material in this reading, and I don't want to get too off topic because I want to get down to the verses 14 and 15 involving Enoch. But you can look up, and most of you are probably familiar with Balak, Korah, and Cain, well, of course, who's the account of which I referenced. But you can look up the accounts of Balak and Korah on your own if you'd like. These are the ones, verse 12. These ones are perilous threats. When you eat together in your expressions of spiritual love, they look out for their own advantage. They're waterless clouds, swept along by the winds. Trees ready for harvest, but they don't have any fruit. Twice, and so they're ready for death by uprooting. So in other words, they came from the point where they were not following the Christ, only to follow Christ, and now to not be following the Christ. That's why it says without any fruit. Twice. Waterless clouds, swept along by winds. We expect there to be rain, and it doesn't come. Right? We go to the trees, it's harvest time, there's no fruit. They don't have none. Verse 13, they're wild waves of the sea, foaming up their own shameful conduct, stars that have lost their place, for which deep darkness has been kept ready for the coming age. So we definitely want to be aware of people who are lying to us, infiltrating our groups, looking out for their own advantage. What do they talk about? Do they steer the conversation away from praising Jah or promoting Jesus or treating others the way we want to be treated? Do they bring up issues of debate just so you can argue with them and they can show you how knowledgeable they think they are? Well, they're trees ready for harvest without any fruit. Right? They have nothing. All they want to do is take away from you the very thing you've worked so hard to gain. Verses 14 and 15, last verses. Even Enoch, the seventh man from Adam, spoke beforehand concerning these infiltrators, saying, Behold, the Lord comes with thousands of angels. He brings, verse 15, about judgment concerning all things. And he makes plain the error of every living thing, concerning all kinds of terrible things, which they spoke against him, in spite of their being wicked sinners. So Jehovah knows everything taking place. We almost know everything taking place. How much more so do you think they know? So nothing escapes their notice. If we make mistakes or do something bad, we can, of course, confess and repent and try to do better. We should. We're not going to get any benefit by not doing that. But if we don't, and if we continue to do things that are not according to how we're made, or we abuse other people or lie to them, and especially if we're infiltrators disrupting the gathering of Christians, you're finished. If you're not finished by those who are mature and strong enough to throw you out now, when Jehovah and his son come with their angels, you'll realize just how pathetic you are then. And I hope you don't. I hope you turn around. But if you're like these people and you're doing these things and you're disrupting our groups for your own selfish gain, then you have Jah ready to rebuke you. And there's nothing else we need to say. So let me now share with you some information regarding this reference to Enoch, because you notice here, just like in the prior day's reading, he references and quotes the Assumption of Moses. He quotes what Michael said to the devil about Moses' body. So he obviously had a copy of it at that time that they were aware of and used and accepted to some extent. So in the same way, many of you have we've all heard of Enoch, but, and many of us have probably heard of the books of Enoch. There are 3 books at least that are attributed to him, but the first one is really the most credible in terms of its manuscript authority and content. So what I want to do is share with you a note In my critical edition of the letter of Jude, if you look in the description below, you'll see a link to the CWJ Forum where you'd have to register because it's only for active CWJs, and that's where I keep my translation. But I've also separately published translations of some texts, one of which is the letter of Jude. So if you go to the Elihu Online Papers link and you look at the last paper listed, number 5, it's the letter of Jude, a new translation according to P72, the earliest text we have of Jude. And if you go into the text, it starts out with the translation, and then it has little symbols for notes. You follow the symbol for verses 14 and 15 regarding this reference to Enoch, and it's going to take you to note Omicron, or what looks like an O, but they're in Greek letters. So it's right here. And you get it so I think you all can see it best. It might be a little too big, so we'll just go down. There we go. Of course, you can, the link is below. You can go and look at it. But let's read this brief portion together regarding verses 14, 15. I could have just summarized it, but I think my note here says it pretty well. So there's no point in me trying to restate it. Let's just read it together so you can also understand the information available in my critical document. So this is from pages 7 and 8, note Omicron, or what looks like an O, to verses 14 and 15 involving Enoch. Let's read it together. Here in verses 14 and 15, Jude refers to what was known as a prophecy from Enoch, the seventh man from Adam. And then I reference the text that refer to Enoch in the Bible, Genesis 4:17, and then compare that with 1 Enoch 68, if you have a text of 1 Enoch. And you could probably find one online. And then the rest of the note, let's just read this together. It won't take long. The book known as 1 Enoch, okay, this is very important, comes primarily from a 15th century, so like 500 years ago, CE Ethiopic version, which preserves the entire works. This is our earliest complete copy. Not that old, but it is based on earlier texts. And we have some texts from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So let's keep reading. But 1 Enoch also has textual support from some Greek and Latin fragments, mostly from the 6th and 8th century CE, or from the 500s and 700s, except for the Chester Beatty Michigan papyrus dated to the 4th century, or the 300s, very close to the text of P72, although that may be 3rd century, and so the 200s. So the Chester Beatty papyrus, the Michigan papyrus dated to the 4th century, preserves Enoch, 1 Enoch 97:6 through 107:3. There are a lot of chapters. In Greek. More important, fragments of the book of 1 Enoch were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, which preserve Aramaic portions of 1 Enoch dating from the late 3rd century BCE. Okay, so several hundred years before Jude, before Jesus. And then I referenced the texts of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls, 4Q in A through G superscript, and 4Q in Aster A through D superscript, and 1Q Giants A through B. These are all texts that you could search, and you'll see the extent to which we have fragments preserving the book of Enoch several hundred years before Jude. So when Jude is quoting from Enoch, or the Assumption of Moses, we have evidence these texts existed in a more complete form before our earliest text in Ethiopic from the 15th century. So these Dead Sea Scroll fragments are incredibly important because they document the existence of this text before the time Jude wrote his letter. Okay, and the words used by Jude in verses 14 through 15, and then I quote right here, and quote it, we just read it, that comes from 1 Enoch 1:9. What Jude is quoting, with slight variation in wording due to the nature and application of Enoch 1:9. In other words, he's adapting the text for his own purpose and what he's writing to the Christians for about these infiltrators. P72 therefore becomes a 3rd century Greek witness to the text of 1 Enoch 1:9. So in the same way that Jude becomes a 3rd century, remember 200s, witness through P72 of the Assumption of Moses' lost ending involving Michael the Archangel and Satan, really our earliest, because Galatius of the 5th century is our other reference to that text. It's all, Jude is not only a text, preserves a text, our earliest text, I should say, of the lost ending of the Assumption of Moses, but it preserves our earliest Greek text of 1 Enoch 1:9. Which is supported by the Aramaic fragments of 1 Enoch in 4Q in C, superscript C of the text that I referenced up here, A through G. So the text that Jude quotes has support, unlike the Assumption of Moses, which we don't have support for the lost ending before Jude. The text he quotes in Jude 14 and 15 has support from 4Q and C. And then I referenced this writing by Osborne, Discourse Analysis and Jewish Apocalyptic in the Epistle of Jude, if you want more information. And I quote Osborne on page 9, last part of what I'll read, in verses 5 through 16, which includes the text we're referencing in Jude now, for Enoch 14 and 15. Jude has utilized the historical incident in Numbers, supported by several well-known pseudepigraphal sections in contemporary literature, as a fundamental warning that the ungodliness of the intruders would result in certain condemnation when Jesus returns in eschatological or end-time judgment. So I just want to make you aware of that information so you understand the relationship between Jude and 1 Enoch and what evidence we have of the text of Enoch, specifically 1 Enoch. And if you need more information or want to review that further, just go to my note, Omicron, on pages 7 and 8 of my Elihu Online Papers, number 5. Okay, so that I think takes care of pretty much everything related to our date text. Now, so we'll continue through the letter of Jude, and then once we're done with the letter of Jude, I'm going to, I wrote an article on the letter of Revelation, or not the letter, the Revelation, and its manuscript support and credibility that that's going to be a show I do right before we start the day texts for Revelation. I'm going to do a separate show to review that article that I wrote. But we're still in Jude, so we'll keep going. Let's finish this up. A lot of great information. Hopefully that our review this morning helped you understand better the reference by Jude to Enoch and then the basis for our text of Enoch. So you can explain more to people about these other texts. Just because we don't have them doesn't mean we're missing something essential. They're just more texts. Doesn't matter whether they were inspired or originally used by John in some way and no longer necessary because of all the things we have today. It's not important. How much do we really need? I don't think we even need the books in the Bible we have. I mean, need in the sense that if we can't have a relationship with Jah and recognize Jesus without them. But of course, the more the better. But we do not need everything. Even John wrote that if he had recorded everything Jesus did, the world couldn't contain the information. So we know there's more things. But we know what we know. And that's really all we need to know at this time. So I thank you all for joining me. Jack, I'm going to get back to you later today or this week on the divine name. Just got very busy with work and things after yesterday's show. And then I've got to get some stuff done today for certain individuals. And then I'll get to some other pending comments and emails and then some issues with Jack on the divine name. Although all you remember, I'm a Christian witness of Jah. So my primary focus is Jah. The name Jah, the God Jah. And I try to avoid discussions involving extended arguments about pronunciation and things like that. I know we have them at times, and I do them occasionally. But I try to avoid them. It's the whole reason I use the name Jah, is to avoid arguments and discussions with people about things that ultimately don't matter. I say don't matter because if they're that hung up over the name or how to pronounce it, then just use Jah. You solve all the problems right there, right? And you won't have to argue anymore. Betsy, you mentioned the lounge. Yes, so some of you may have noticed I put a little music channel together because this way, you know, you of course you have all the videos and things, but I try to select music that I think will be enjoyable. Obviously I don't vouch for all of the words or the content because who can do that, right? I just try to pick the best mixes that will give us good sound and hopefully as few of words as possible so that we can add our own words. That's what I do. I try to add my own words and content, or I make use of what they're saying in a way that I want to say it. So if a song says, say my name, I think of Jesus or Jah. I don't think of those people or me. Or if the song involves getting close to someone, and either you should try to understand that to promote hetero relationships. That's good. And or just think of it in terms of Jah. You can use these songs and sounds and not be subject to what they're saying if it's not entirely in line with your thinking, and just make use of the information they do present that you can. It's like a movie, right? I mean, we go to some of these movies occasionally, and they're pretty much mostly garbage. But, you know, we'll get some benefit from them. And so it's similar with the music, only a little bit better, actually, because we don't have all the visuals and things. So if you don't like it, you don't have to listen. I'll add additional mixes here and there. And if you note something seriously problematic, let me know. But again, I'm not expecting perfection from these non-Christian mixes. And it's not like I won't include some Christian quote-unquote music. It's just I don't know a lot of these Christian artists. And I'm not so sure that the things they're saying are accurate in the way that I would say them, so that it's easier for me to just use a non-Christian song and add my own words versus try to figure out what the person who claims to be a Christian is saying until I know them, right? Because it's really all about the message. Whose message is getting through to us, and is it effective? And if we're aware, we can filter out the things that we know are not true. We have to do that in this world because we're not in a Christian world, right? We're in a world that is primarily, well, the God of this world is the devil. Even though Jesus may have authority over him and be directing things, he still exists. And so we have to be careful. And I try to use music to motivate me to praise Jah. It's the whole point. Everything you do should be used to praise Jah or help other people. You praise Jah when you do that too. So I hope you enjoy the mixes and the songs, and I'll do my best to try to make it to have variety, but something that will be enjoyable without offending people. But again, I'm not here to cater to all of your desires in terms of preferences like music or movies. If you don't like the garbage dumps, you don't like the lounge, then just go and watch something else. We like these things, or we enjoy them to the extent that we can, and they're motivating us to do good works. That's the primary thing to consider, is what you're doing, is what you're watching, is what you're listening to, are the people you're around helping you do good, helping you at least praise Jah and not interfering with you when you do. Hopefully they're helping you, but at the very least, all we're asking is that people don't interfere with us, right? Because if they do that, well, then we know they're not on our team. They're actually against us. And we have to limit our involvement. Can't praise Jah with people who are against us, right? But people who are not against us, they may not be entirely supportive of us. He that is not against you is for you. Those are Jesus' words. So try to live by them. I appreciate all of you for joining me today. And we'll continue through the letter of Jude tomorrow. And then once we finish that, as I mentioned, we'll do a show on the the Revelation and the credibility of it. And then we'll use that as an intro for our Revelation Day text. So I thank you all for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful day. And may God bless you in Jesus' name.